Hi Year 8, welcome to your fifth history lesson of the topic of the First World War. It's Miss Cherry today. I hope you are all well. Our lesson title is How Did the War Affect Civilians? Now, civilians are just the people that are at home, those that are not in the military or fighting at war. In order to be prepared for your lesson today, you need to have your history workbook, a pen, some scrap paper, and definitely no distractions. So now would be a great time to pause the video and get yourself ready to learn. First of all, then we're going to have a little look at a knowledge recall quiz, which is based on last lesson's work, where you looked at the impact the war had around the world. Now, our first question is, where was the Eastern Front? Secondly, who did the Italian join forces with and where? Why did both sides of the war depend on the ships? The soldiers who fought at Gallipoli were from where and how many lost their lives? What diseases did soldiers die of in Africa? Now would be a great time to pause the video and so you have time to do the questions. So let's have a little look at our answers and you can mark them off as you go along. So as you may remember, the Eastern Front stretched over 1,000 miles from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. The Italians joined forces with the British and fought in harsh conditions of the Alps and Dolomites. You might remember that soldiers had to climb steep mountains and cut shelters in the rock. Both sides of the war depended on the ships as they brought food and raw materials to their country, and those that were attacked by the German U-boats then prevented food and resources getting to the country that they needed. The soldiers who fought at Gallipoli were from where and how many lost their lives? There was around 10,880 soldiers from Australia and New Zealand, that lost their lives. The soldiers in Africa died of dysentery and malaria. So if you want to pause the video now to mark your answers and give yourself a score out of 5. So just to highlight to you again, our lesson title for today is How Did the War Affect Civilians? And our lesson objectives of what we want to achieve by the end of today's lesson is to first of all understand the views of the majority of the British population to conscientious objectors, know the various features of the home front, and also explain the impact of the features on civilians' lives. Now would be a great time to have your knowledge organiser out, and if you have a highlighter or even just a star beside the vocabulary that we are going to be focusing on today that will pop up in today's lesson. So as you can see, you have censorship, which is limiting the freedom to speak or publish information. Conscientious objectors, which you may have picked up on that I said a second ago, people who refuse to fight in a war due to their religious or humanitarian views. Conscription, the government forced people to enlist in the army. DORA, which stands for Defence of the Realm Act. This restricted people's freedoms during the war. Enemy aliens, people from Germany, Austria or Turkey living in England during the war. Munitions, materials used in war such as ammunition and weapons, and famously the women took over the responsibilities of preparing these in the factories while the men went to fight. Non-combat roles, war work such as bearing stretchers which did not involve fighting. propaganda, information that is spread that promotes a certain cause, such as the press writing a positive news about the war and not relaying the actual reality of the war on the Western Front. Rations, the amount of something a government allows people to have, e.g., food, which was extremely important during the war in order for everyone to have enough food. And total war, a war in which everything and everyone in a country is geared towards winning the conflict. So let's have a little look at our starter for today. This is a political cartoon, and as you can see, it is labelled the conscientious objector at the front. Now, when we're saying about the front, we're talking about the front line where the soldiers were fighting against the enemy. Our question today then is, what does this suggest about the feelings towards them during the First World War? Now, this might be a little bit more challenging, but I want you to try and to suggest at least 3 ideas. The little blurb at the bottom has been written out for you in a text box so that you can see that a little bit more clearly. And it says, when the shot and shell are flying and the mighty cannons boom, he is tidying up the trenches with a dustpan and a broom. So now would be a great time for you to pause the video so that you can write down your ideas, and remember, it is quite challenging, but give it a go, okay? So let's have a little look at our answers then for this conscientious objector poster at the front line. Now, this image suggests they took up the female roles, those typical female roles for this time period, as they are wearing aprons, as you can see in this image. This was a time where the traditional female role was considered a stay-at-home housewife, cleaning up, looking after the children. And this is how these conscientious objectors are being portrayed in this photograph here, this cartoon. It also suggests that they do not have the same respect, as they are doing the easier jobs compared to those in battle. And that is highlighted by the fact that the soldiers are in the background ready to fight. You can see that one is holding a rifle aiming at the enemy, okay? The cartoon also shows soldiers smirking. As you can see, there's a few of those, maybe 3 soldiers there, looking towards the conscientious objectors. And this suggests their negative opinion on these objectors that refuse to fight in the war. Now would be a great time for you to pause and write down anything that you have missed. If you're still a little bit unsure about what a conscientious objector is, you are going to read about that in a little second and find out some more information. Right, let's get on to some new knowledge then. How did the war affect civilians? Remember, is our lesson title for today. The soldiers saw the worst of the war, but the war also had a huge impact on the people at home. And as we mentioned before, our key term in our knowledge organiser, this was a total war. The government expected everyone, whether you were on the front line or the home front, to play their part in the war effort, and this included many different things that you're going to look at. We had air raids. Air raids were extremely common when the enemy came to attack, okay? We also, you can see the destruction that they caused to this home here in Hartlepool in December 1914. Second of all, conscription and conscientious objectors that we have just touched on. Enemy aliens. Now, these were aliens not the real aliens. They were Germans, Austrians, Hungarians, and Turks, okay, that were considered the enemy. And if you were of that population, then you had to be interned. And these feelings from the British public were harsh towards these people that were known as enemy aliens. There was anti-German riots in London. Shops were looted because the German U-boat had sank the HMS Louisiana, which killed over 1,000 British passengers. And this is a poster. Now this is for Canada, but there would have been similar ones to this in Britain as well. And it says, every German, Austrian, Hungarian and Turk is hereby notified to report himself immediately at the House of Registrar for Alien Enemies, Toronto. Okay. You're also going to look at the restrictions that were placed on the British population through DORA, which we mentioned, remember, stands for the Defence of the Realm Act. You've also got women's war work, the responsibilities that they had taken up. They worked on the land army, they worked in the munitions factories, typically doing things that weren't standard for that time. Food shortages and rationing, propaganda and censorship. Here's a little propaganda poster that was put out for the time, which also touches on food shortages and rationing. We are saving you, you save food. Well-fed soldiers will win the war. And lastly, bereavement. And you can see here that this is a telegram which was sent to a family who had potentially lost a brother, son, husband during the fighting on the Western Front. And it was common that people dreaded seeing a telegram coming to their door, and you will learn a little bit more about this when you read through your resource pack. So we're now on to our final main activity, okay? So you will see this in your workbook, activity 5.3, and you will need your 2 pages of resources to help you. First of all, what you need to do is explain the key terms in your own words, which is conscientious objectors, enemy aliens, and propaganda. The next task that you need to do is you need to decide 2 features that you believe had the biggest impact on civilians' lives during the First World War. So that is from your 8 boxes that you've just read through on air raids, conscription and conscientious objectors, enemy aliens, restrictions, women's war work, food shortages and rationing, propaganda and censorship, and finally bereavement. You will need to describe the feature, and then you also need to give specific evidence of the impact that had. Now this is really important that you do this to a high standard for your 6th lesson, which is coming up next. Finally, activity 5.4 is some further research for you. This is a link for the Imperial War Museum, and these are the voices of the First World War and their experience of life on the home front. They are excellent accounts from first-hand people that actually experienced this, and it would be great if you could describe the impact the war had on them and maybe even take some quotes from them, which would also be useful for your final lesson. Thank you for listening today to my lesson. I hope it was useful. Remember, if you need any help at all, please get in contact with your class teacher via email or show my homework. Thank you. Bye.